joining us today. It is the last session of the festival. The festival's been, I think, a great success, and I'd like to pay tribute to my colleague Ed, who's organised it all, really. I've done nothing other than front a few sessions, which is easy. So thanks, Ed, for all your work, and I think it's been much appreciated by everyone who's attended. And I'm really looking forward to today's session. I always like question time at National Conference, and this is a very good substitute, I think. As ever, we've got a really interesting panel of people, and I'd like to introduce you to them first and thank them for their time in making themselves available for today. So we've got Philippa Young, who's Chair of Road Safety GB, just Chair of Road Safety. Hello, Philippa, how are you?
Morning, everybody. I'm really well, thank you. Nice to see you all today.
We've got Elizabeth Box, Liz as I always call her, Head of Research at the RSC Foundation. Hi, Liz, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Morning, everybody.
We've got Michael McDonald, Director of Road Safety Scotland, with his dogs. Hello, Michael.
Good morning, and I hope they stay quiet. But as Nick said beforehand, they may make more sense than me anyway.
We've got Meredith Hughes, Chairman of Road Safety Support, more commonly known as MED. Hi, Med, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. And finally, but last but not least, certainly, we've got Colin Brown, Director of Campaigns with the Motorcycle Action Group. Hi, Colin.
Good morning. Thank you for the invite. It's great to be here.
More commonly known by me as the hairy biker. So,
I put on a shirt and tie special so I don't scare anybody.
Now then, as I said just now, I'd done quite a bit of work preparing questions. You always do in this situation, just in case the audience don't come forth. But actually today it looks as if we've got a really good audience, so with lots of questions. So I'm going to start with mine, which will be a loosener really, and then we're going to go straight to the audience for some of the questions they've set in advance. So my only question, hopefully of the day, if all goes well, is as follows. In a presentation delivered as part of the festival, a chap called Tim Gibbs from an organisation called Auto Speed Watch said enforcement should be focused on drivers who are truly reckless with speed, rather than those with a generally good moral compass who travel a few miles per hour over the road. I'm very interested to know what the panel think of that. And I'm going to start with Ned. Okay.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Because there's now some echo coming from somewhere. So if people can keep on mute, I think that just got sorted. Excellent. I saw the presentation. I read up on it at the time. And the simple answer is no, I don't agree with him. But of course, there's nuances in these things. Of course, reckless and dangerous people should be targeted. There's no end to that. That is the core. But unfortunately, we have learned as soon as we remove the sort of mass enforcement of speeding laws that people will seize the opportunity to go faster. And the actual speed limits are already ignored to what people think is the enforcement levels of 10% plus 2. Sometimes need to be reminded that that actually is an ACPO limit, which is advisory, not compulsory. Sorry, a national policing limit that's advisory, not compulsory. And so the de facto speed limit keeps rising. And then everybody who's involved in casualty and fatality reduction knows that actually doing a few miles an hour over the top at 30 miles an hour is in some ways much more dangerous than doing substantially more at 70 on a motorway. So there are nuances to this. I don't think you can do without mass enforcement. Of course, we want to take really dangerous people off the road, but all of us are a little more dangerous than we perhaps think.
Okay, Med, thank you very much for that. Anyone else want to come in and answer that? Any of the other panelists, if you got a view on this?
Yeah, if I can, I'll jump in on this one. I think it is like Meda said, it's a very nuanced question, and I think we need to understand what we mean by enforcement first. I think a lot of people, when they talk about enforcement, they merely think about what's the penalty, and I think that probably confuses the answer to this question. I think that yeah, obviously there's a need to educate, certainly from a MAG perspective, where we commonly use the strapline educate, don't legislate, and I think the same applies with road safety. We would prefer education rather than punishment. So I think yeah, we need to be sure that we understand what we mean by enforcement, and take the view that yeah, in very many cases, if you exercise a zero tolerance policy, you can be penalising people who are literally just making a mistake. So that is something that we need to avoid. But yes, obviously, if people are willfully using speed recklessly, then we need to be doing something about that.
Anyone else got a view? Liz?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always interesting to have a question like that posed, and I would be along the same lines as Meg, really, that no, I don't agree with that sentiment. And I think this is largely because we need to be thinking about promoting positive social norms, and it really matters. If anybody hasn't seen it already, I'd really recommend a paper that we published probably about a month ago by one of our public policy members, Steve Green, who he talked about kind of policing in general. And I thought it was really interesting, him talking about broken windows theory and how, you know, if we perceive places as unregulated, then people start to react accordingly. And the other really interesting thing he kind of mentioned in that was what's called routine activity theory, which is that you need capable guardianship, which essentially means you don't just need speed cameras to enforce speed. There's many, many different ways in which we can enforce speed these days. We could be using many more public services or Highways England road safety traffic officers in different ways to kind of encourage the social norm of safe speed. So we all know the consequences if we're not travelling at the appropriate speed, and even just a few miles above the limit makes a difference. So I think we do still need to try and keep a lid on that, whilst also releasing resources to deal with the hardest, you know, most reckless drivers, of course, but that doesn't mean that we don't do both.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else, Michael or Philippa, want to have a say on this one or not?
I'm happy to add, but I think I'd just reiterate everything that everyone else has said, and it's about really as getting the appropriate interventions for those violations that are taking place. So education absolutely has to be at the core of it, and it's tying in those that policing activity with those high-end offenders and making that appropriate for those individuals. So I'd agree with the rest of the panel, actually. I think speed enforcement matters at all levels. It's what we do about that that really can make a difference.
Okay, that's great. I thought it was a very interesting presentation by the guy, actually, Tim Gibb. He's not a road safety professional or practitioner, but I thought he made some good points, and it was an interesting contribution to the festival. Really made us think, I think. But I thank you for your answers. Anyone in the audience want to come back on that? Anyone come on the chat line about it? Ed, I don't think they have they?
No, nobody has yet.
And no one wants to raise their hand and ask a question or come back on anything that the panelists have said? No, okay, that's great. Well, thank you very much for that one. So now I'm going to, if I can, if Jane Dealey's in the audience, would she put her hand up, please? Yeah, Jane, okay. I'd like to invite you to put your question next, if that's okay.
Good morning. Sorry, I've just literally sent my printer going in the background, so if there's anything, any noises off. Well, I knew as soon as I did that, you'd call my name. My question,
Jane, as well, please. Sorry.
Sorry.
You want to tell us who you are?
I'm currently Road Safety Education Manager at Wiltshire Council.
Okay, thank you.
Mine comes from monitoring social media stuff that's going on and general publicity stuff. My question is, are the continued rise in road user tribalism and the accusations of victim blaming a threat or an opportunity to road safety messaging?
That's an interesting question. Who wants to pick that one up?
I'm happy to start, actually, and at Warwickshire, most of you know that I manage road safety teams at Warwickshire, and actually we're getting accused of this quite regularly at the moment in terms of our messaging around our Be Safe, Be Seen campaigns. We have a particular cycle activist who thinks that's very much victim blaming. And it's a hard challenge, really, and we get this in other areas, don't we, in terms of those messages that we're trying to put it off. But I see them as a challenge. You know, we do need to listen to those individuals, but I think many of our education campaigns aren't about victimisation. It's about awareness, and that's what it's about. It's about making the safe promotion of those activities that you know, the stats demonstrate to us vulnerable road users. You know, we need to be supporting those. We need to be educating, often the car drivers, actually, that inherently are vehicle one. But I absolutely see it as a challenge, actually, and we shouldn't be turning off those voices of challenge in saying that we're victim blaming. but we need to understand where those individuals are coming from. But it's more and more common, I would agree, Jane.
Michael, what's your view on this? Sorry, Liz.
I think Michael's had to pop off. He said he had some issues with his technology. He's going to join us in a minute again.
You wanted to have a say?
Yeah, very briefly. I wonder if this is probably a product of just how we deal with road safety at the moment. I mean, in the work that we're doing at the RAC Foundation on the Road Collision Investigation Project, we're very much trying to get away from the sharp end, the road user, and try and think about the whole system and what we could do to actually improve safety. That doesn't mean to say that a motorcyclist maybe could do with wearing PPE, or there's something very at the sharp end that could be dealt with, but often we're thinking about, well, what are business practices, what is legislation, what is the law, and what supports these things. And I think because we currently work in a system where we don't have independent collision investigation, it's very much focused on criminal culpability and blame, maybe that then leads to these other issues, which is people, as you say, Philippa, are rightly trying to tackle important issues that individuals can do to help keep themselves safe, but it's within this whole I guess discussion we have about who's at fault. So maybe it's just kind of a product of how it works at the moment. Hopefully it will change in time.
Jane, do you want to articulate a little bit of your view on this and come back on what the panelists have said?
It's very noticeable that, as Philippa said, a lot of our traditional messages this time of year, the be safe, be seen stuff, the minute anybody puts stuff up there about cyclists or motorcyclists or pedestrians doing something, that there's somebody there waiting in the wings to come and put a message saying, no, you're blaming the victims. To me, it's a kind of that balance between common sense of, yeah, if I was that cyclist or pedestrian, I'd want to be doing as much as I could to poke the drivers in the eye and make sure that they had seen me, whilst accepting that, yes, drivers are often at fault and have things to do as well. But it's very hard to keep channeling your messaging and making sure that every time you're all inclusive. I guess it's a little bit the same as the low traffic neighbourhood stuff at the moment, with the message that actually we have to be fair to everybody, it's very difficult sometimes when you are trying to target a particular group or a particular issue, that yes, sometimes you have to leave somebody out of the mix, but you'll pick them up next time on something slightly different. But it's just interesting to know what the kind of the move is. Interesting to hear about that. Yeah, taking that more safe systems approach and pulling back from the very sharp end.
Thank you. Thanks, Jane. Ed, do you want to pick up any comments on the chat line at the moment? Bring them in that are relevant.
Yeah, I'll just hand over to Colin first. I think he has something he wanted to add.
Colin, sorry.
Thank you. Yes, so I think largely from a motorcycling perspective, obviously, as you'd expect me to be approaching this, I think that there is a sort of like a worrying undercurrent at the moment in terms of discourse around road safety when it comes to vulnerable road users. There does seem to be this move towards a bit of a blame culture, which I think is totally the wrong route to be taking. The latest report that we saw come out from PACT about who's killing whom, I think that's a terrible framing of how to look at these things. Nobody sets out to kill somebody else on the road. So as soon as we start framing it in this way, I'm not saying that the statistics are not relevant or they're not important or they shouldn't be studied, but it is about how we frame the discourse around it. Motorcycling, if you speak to the majority of motorcyclists, you will get a very clear answer back from the majority of people, is that motorcyclists feel that they are victimized, they are blamed, they do have fingers pointed at them all the time. You know, I mean, I can quote various examples where I've seen, you know, council literature coming out saying that motorcyclists are a danger to themselves. This is just not acceptable. It's not the way to be framing this discussion. We've got to be looking at how we improve things for literally everybody. That includes motorcyclists. There can't be any exclusion. There can't be any segregation in terms of how we deal with road safety for certain groups. We've got to be looking at it as a whole system. It needs to work for everybody. Motorcyclists, cyclists, pedestrians, we're all legitimate users of the road network. We need to make sure that the entire system works for everybody, not just a chosen few.
David Davies is in the audience. David, did you want to say anything at this point about the PACS report? If you do, put your hand up. If not, then I noticed you made a comment on the side, but you've got a couple of raised hands, Ed.
Can I come in?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, I'd love to comment. Thank you. I did put a quick comment in the chat. So we've been very pleased with the response to our report, and I would emphasise that the title of the report is not who kills. The title of the report is what kills most. It's very much about a classification in terms of vehicle types. It does not blame, and we're very keen and emphasise in the report, this is not about blame, not about responsibility, not about fault. It's just pointing out that when we analyse road deaths, and these are the official road casualty figures for Great Britain for 2019, fatalities only. When you analyse those, in fatalities involving pedestrians, many of those are attributable to HGVs, many of them are attributable to cars, some to motorcycles and so forth, and that's how we've done it. Now, I don't think it's too much of a leap to say that in a collision between an HGV and a pedestrian, where the pedestrian dies, it was the HGV that killed the pedestrian. So that's the analysis that we provided, and it's the reason we've done it is that a little bit back to this whole point, which Philippa answered first of all. There is a lot of analysis, a lot of emphasis on vulnerability, and the classic chart which is provided shows road user deaths per mile travelled. And I'm sorry, Colin, but as you well know, motorcycles stick out there like a sore thumb. But of course, after that, then it implies that pedestrians and cyclists are terribly dangerous. And I've seen senior people take that message away from that simple chart. The fact that most people don't walk 5,000 miles a year, whereas they do drive, often escapes. So we've shown the total deaths attributed to each mode by distance travelled and throughout the year, and we've just tried to sort of balance up that analysis.
Thank you, David. Thanks for that clarification. Anyone else in the audience want to come in on this point before we move on? Ed, is there anyone there?
No, we're all good.
No one else with a raised hand. That's fine. Good. Anyone else on the panel before I move on? Want to come in with a word or two on this point? It's been a very interesting discussion. No, we're happy to move on. That's good. Great. Thank you for that. Can I ask Cliff, is Cliff Short in the audience? If he is, can he raise his hand, please? He's asked a question and then not. Oh, there we go. Is he there, Ed?
Yeah.
Cliff Short. Can you unmute Cliff? Can you ask your question, Cliff, when you're unmuted?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Yeah, I wrote my question down, but it was basically to find out what's going to be done about entrepreneurs creating new safety ideas for pedestrian crossings and etc. across the board.
Yeah, I think your point was, I think the question was about you if someone.
What help is there?
Yeah, I've had this question asked many times as the front face of Road Safety GB, really, where someone comes up and says, I've got an idea, that how can people take it forward? I think that's the question, really. If someone comes up with a really good idea and they're not working for an organisation involved in road safety, how can they take their idea forward? Any suggestions or comments from the panel? Liz?
Yeah, I guess there's two different points here, isn't there? There's kind of how do you get the funding and get people to take it forward, and then there's the question of how do you ensure that what you're proposing is something that's going to be effective to deliver. So I guess taking those two in turn, obviously there's the Road Safety Trust and a number of other bodies that you could go to if you wanted to seek funding. They often have various different calls to particularly try out things in local areas. So I guess the key thing is try and engage with either one of your local road safety officers or somebody that can actually help you on the ground, try out something and deliver it. And I guess from an intervention design point, because that's what I spend quite a lot of my time doing, it's brilliant to have ideas. We're desperate for new ideas and things to try out. But the key thing there is just because something's a good idea doesn't mean we should necessarily do it. So the key thing is to make sure you trial and test it, and that you're using as much good evidence as you can before you put something in place, and then you evaluate it. You know, we need to trial new things, and if things fail, that's fine, but we need to understand that they're not working and then move on and do something different.
Yeah. Can be very daunting for someone who has an idea which they want to try and pedal forward, and if they go through the official channels, it's so difficult for them to make any progress, really. I think that's probably a point that Cliff would concur with, but I can't offer a solution, really, Cliff, but I can recognize your difficulty in getting an idea forward.
Well, sorry, can I come in there?
Yeah.
Well, just to sort of like update you on this, what Elizabeth was saying, I've got everything in place. I've got funding, I've got a council willing to do a pilot scheme. My blockage is the Department for Transport giving type approval.
Yeah.
Oh.
I have a patent on the idea as well.
Yeah. Okay. As road safety support run laboratory, certified laboratory, and we do a lot of the work for Home Office type approval. The Home Office type approval process at the moment is struggling because within the Home Office two key things happen as a result of budgets. One is that the overall responsibility went from CAST, their own laboratory, to the DSTL. And so there is a prioritization process which is taking its time. And secondly, as part of the budget changes, staffing within the Home Office itself has greatly reduced. I'd invite you, if you would like, some advice on perhaps the best way to take the next stage forward. If it is a product that requires type approval, then you can send it to me, and I'll make sure Trevor and the guys see it. We'll give you some advice.
That's very kind. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, Cliff. So if you contact me afterwards, then I'll put you in touch with Ned.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Nick.
Great, good. Really good. Thank you very much. Third question that we've had in today off the hoof is from Nigel Lloyd Jones. Is Nigel in the audience? I'm sure he is. If he is, could you raise your hand, Nigel, please, and Ed will unmute you. Hello, Nigel.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Nigel Lloyd Jones. I'm Priority Lead at the Police Crime Commissioner's Office in Gloucestershire. First of all, just want to say a huge thank you to Nick and to Ed. I just think this has been absolutely brilliant. You know, I'm relatively new to the road safety community, and I've learned an enormous amount in the last 3 weeks. So my question really is concerning branding. I come from a marketing comms background. I'm very aware of what a power a brand can bring to messaging. Now here in Gloucestershire, we at the moment really do not have a coherent brand. All our branding is just, you know, the police, the constabulary, the county council, and we're already aware that can actually project a rather authoritarian message. And I'm personally very drawn to think and to everything that expresses. And I'm very interested in the panel's views around this subject. Thank you.
Right, Michael, do you want to come in here on the question of are you with us, Michael? I'm not sure Michael is. Okay.
I am here, Nick. Sorry, I'm having the connection issues, so I've gone off video and that it improves things. I'm back on video now. But yeah, we've pretty much done that in Scotland as far as we can see. We've in the past decade or so, we've tried to establish different brands. We had Don't Risk It, which became our strapline, and we attached it to all our campaigns. I think more recently, as many people will know, we have used the character of Gran to tackle young drivers, and we're using Drive Like Grans in the car to kind of identify with someone who is considered precious cargo by young drivers and they would want to protect. And as somebody who gives, I suppose it's non-judgmental advice is probably what your Gran gives you. And so we've done that with Gran. We've also done it with motorbikes. We've got a platform called Live Fast Die Old, which is again, it's about providing safety tips through interesting content. So we've tried to establish brands that people can attach themselves to, and ones that will maintain interest, and provided we continue to update and deliver content that people want. So it is something we're doing, and I think quite successfully. The original reviews of Gran are such that we've continued with it, and the latest ones, the latest evaluations of our campaign suggest that Gran hasn't worn out yet, and so we should continue to use it.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen your campaigns, and they're very good. I have to say, Michael, very successful, I think. Philippa, did you want to add anything in here?
Yeah, it's really interesting, this one, Nigel, because in Warwickshire, we're just kind of relaunching our road safety partnership, and very much like Gloucestershire, historically, we've kind of gone for those individual statements and individual logos and things like that. And I think you're right, this sort of cohesive brand gives us strength to the message. And more importantly for us, it gives us an opportunity as an authority to do things that as an individual local authority, sometimes we might feel uncomfortable with. So actually having a brand gives you a lot more freedom, I believe. So I'd thoroughly support it. And there's some really particularly very strong brands nationally for some partnerships. So yeah, have a look around there and perhaps have a look what works. And I think the Road Safety Scotland stuff they've been doing, and the Think brands, but I think it's one that you need to keep pushing. But it's about getting in at the senior levels within, particularly, I would say, the local authority itself are often very uncomfortable about using an arm's length brand for things.
Yeah, very good. Anyone else on the panel want to say anything on this one before I go back to Nigel? Yeah, Med?
Thank you. I think one of the original ideas, they didn't articulate it when they created road safety partnerships and safety camera partnerships as a brand. They just thought it was a good idea that organizations worked together, and this takes it further forward. I mean, in addition to the groups, and we recognize how good Scotland have been, I mean, there's the Peninsula, there's Go Safe Wales, and it gives them strength to actually bring a number of bodies together. And I think it is something radically that we should look at as developing further, particularly if we're thinking about changing the overall policy, particularly around enforcement, which tends to be the rubbing point for the public. We need to get these messages in tune and together. And the key people there, I think, from the policing side are often not the operational officers, but the Police and Crime Commissioner's office. And so it's about making it, as it undoubtedly is, a political issue, a priority issue, around saving life rather than just who gets what budget.
Yeah, thank you. Nigel, did you want to say anything, come back to on anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that we have got, there's a great momentum here. There's a great feeling going in this direction, but just to add another element, I mean, for me, you know, there does need to be a point of time, you know, during the year where we recognize the people behind the brand. And I think that's a great opportunity to bring forward all these amazing people who are keeping our roads safe and who are the real heroes. So I think that hopefully will give a real reassurance that recognition comes through.
Great. Thanks, Nigel. Thanks for that. Is Neil Gregg able to put his hand up, please, and put the question he's just put in the chat column? Neil there?
Yeah, I certainly can. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, as you might imagine, having read the recent RAC Foundation report, Driver Training for Future Automated Vehicles, it showed clearly that if you do give people some training in taking back control when an automated vehicle suddenly hands back control, they cope with it much better. I just wondered how we get that training actually out into the market. How do we deliver that training in the future? Because at the moment, trying to get people to take any sort of training after their driving test is very, very difficult. So I was wondering a bit if the panel had any thoughts on that. Clearly, obviously, I would like IEM RoadSmart to deliver that kind of training, but I'd welcome their comments on that anyway. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. So this is about the issue of drivers taking back control of an automated vehicle when they need to, and how they go about it. And the report, as Neil said, indicated how much better people were at doing it once they'd received some proper training, rather than just looking at a manual to understand how to do it. So anyone on the panel want to come in on this one? It's quite a technical question, but I think it's an educational issue, so there might be something in it for the road safety professionals amongst us.
Nick, I'm happy to talk about it, the report that we published, so and kind of the reasons for it, because I don't know if people saw the work that Nottingham did for us previously, which showed how difficult people find it to take over control. And after that piece, we realised that, well, given that these vehicles are coming, and given that people find this so difficult, is there a way to train? Because there hadn't really been very much research done to say, is it even trainable? So I think it's a proof of concept. It's important to say that at this stage. It was only obviously small sample sizes, but it showed really promising results. And I think it was almost, they were thinking about the design of it as in, you know, almost when you get your vehicle from the manufacturer, or when you go and pick it up from the garage, do you have some sort of training at that stage rather than being given a manual or given a show round, and how would that work? So it's promising. It's certainly something we need to think about going forwards. And I think we were quite heartened to see that it was possible to train, because before that we were very concerned about this sort of level 3 autonomy and what that would mean for people. So yeah, there's a huge amount more work to be done. And I'm not quite sure who does it next, but at least the conversation has been started.
Yeah, good. Anyone else want to say anything, Colin?
I think this is it's a very interesting area, certainly coming at it from my perspective. Motorcyclists generally have very serious concerns about automation. And how we get to fully automated vehicles. I think it's this transitional phase where you're going to have vehicles that are partly automated and do require the attention of the driver. As obviously vulnerable road users, motorcyclists feel that there's often the case to be argued that the automated systems are not as good at detecting motorcycles on the road as they should be, which means that even when they are in operation, we would rather the driver was paying attention. So again, the fact that we need to deliver training for how to use these systems is in effect a bit of a worrying situation, because it does indicate that people are possibly too willing to just abdicate the responsibility of understanding that, yes, these systems are there to assist you, they're not there to do the job for you, which means that you need to remain alert all the time. We can't afford to have people just sitting back reading a book relying on these systems. We need to be sure that people do realise that, yeah, okay, we've got systems that are there to assist you in driving this vehicle, but that doesn't take away from the fact that you need to be alert at all times, regardless of whether the system is telling you need to take over.
So what you're saying there is that there's an important job to be done in terms of how we pitch the arrival of autonomous vehicles, in terms of whether we do make them out to be autonomous, or whether we actually say that they're vehicles the drivers still have very much to be in control of. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's an awful lot of misconceptions, and again, it's the way that things are advertised. So as soon as we start talking about autonomous vehicles, everybody thinks science fiction. I just sit there and the vehicle does it all for me. We're not there yet, and people need to be aware of that. These are driver aids. They are not autonomous vehicles. I think that's where we run into this difficulty. Is that, yeah, we need to. It is, yes. I mean, obviously the actual mechanics of how you operate the systems is one thing, which, yes, you can get from a manual, but I think it's probably more to do with understanding what these things are actually there to do and how they do it. I think that's where people are just assuming, oh, this is just yeah, I can basically switch off and look at my mobile phone for half an hour now while I'm on the motorway. It's not that at all.
Yeah, I mean, this research was very much designed looking at what happens in cockpits in aeroplanes when essentially pilots need to perform a monitoring role, so that there's still a role for them in those sort of situations where they still have to think about handover of control. And essentially the kind of behaviour change development, it was a sort of, I think they called it chat, which was kind of the stages you need to go through. It was very much about hazard perception awareness, and always, as you say, Colin, keeping that kind of awareness going, even if you've got on a motorway a system that's doing a lot of the job for you. So it was very much to see about that, not when you're giving full control, but when you've still got to have some sort of awareness and how to train for that. So yeah.
We had a question on a related topic to this from Des Payne from BHS. Is Des in the audience? Is he? Can he put his hand up if possible? Because it'd be a good point to hear from you, Des. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Nick. And yeah, again, just echo what everyone else has said. You know, thanks for the month's worth of discussion and educational presentations. But I just really wanted to get the panel's thoughts around autonomous vehicles and the technology in the future. Obviously, we believe it's all going to reduce the amount of incidents out there on the road, which is fantastic. But particularly interested in overtaking horses and cyclists with a recommended distance speed, allowing for that unpredictability. So do we think the technology will be able to understand that in the future, those types of hazards, or will the humans always have to, you know, take over? And I am from the British Horse Society.
Yeah, yeah. Anyone want to pick up on that one? Colin again.
Yeah, so I think this is one of these things that, from my perspective, I struggle to see how we're going to get to fully automated vehicles unless we go down a route of segregated road space. And that is obviously something that is of great concern for people like myself who transport, I think, and again, this is sort of like, again, possibly a skew that is held within the motorcycling world, is that most motorcyclists these days, it's not purely about transport. It is a recreation. It is a leisure pursuit. So it is something that we wish to continue doing, regardless of whether or not autonomous vehicles are there. And yeah, the complexities. I think we can show quite clearly at the moment the technology isn't there. I'm no expert in the technology, but yeah, I struggle to understand how we can possibly get to something where you can program a computer to fully predict what an unpredictable human being or animal or anything else is going to do. And I think this is about it. Computers and coding is very good when you've got a predictable situation, but when you've got an unpredictable situation, which is what we've got on the roads, I fail to see how we're going to get there. Like I say, that may be me being overly negative about it, but certainly in the short to medium term, we've got big concerns about this whole area.
I think Med wants to come in.
I don't see us moving to full automation anytime in the near future. I think there are issues similar to the ones Colin's raised that need to be sorted out. I actually am more positive about it. Being out here in the Gulf, we have, first of all, we have a lot of segregation of modes of transport. It's a luxury you have when you're building from scratch in a desert. You can simply put a dedicated cycle lane through, or a road. I mean, there are opportunities. We do have motorcyclists here and they share the roads with the car users, but it is going to be an extended period. But when you see the advances that are coming through artificial intelligence and particularly machine learning, and the ability to move beyond the existing types of technology sensors to a new generation of them, actually I think we'll be looking back in a few years' time, because they will learn what a horse looks like as opposed to a car. I'm already seeing technology that in the middle of a junction in Karachi with thousands, literally thousands of individual road users on pedal bikes, motorcycles, on foot, cars, and little tuk-tuks, the computer with one camera, one box is picking them all out individually, all of them, predicting their tracks and moving it through. So I think we are on the verge of a revolution in that side. And I think that then the relative problem of approaching, you know, an equestrian, a horse rider from the rear, where you slow, you come back, you give them a wide berth, you look after the horse and rider as well as yourself. Nobody wants your car kicked, I suppose, but as somebody who lives in Derbyshire, I experienced a very early problem with the radar on my vehicle identifying a cyclist and slamming the brakes on as I was ready to move around it. And the lorry driver behind me, who perhaps wasn't paying full attention, nearly rear-ended me. So we're somewhere between those two extremes, and it will take some time. But I am confident that we will have these things. And the one thing that always comes back to me when you talk to the people with automated vehicles is that they don't get drunk, they're not out on drugs, and they haven't fallen asleep at the wheel. So there's going to be compensatory opportunities with increasing automation.
Yeah. Thanks for that. There was a very interesting live discussion session earlier in the festival about automated vehicles. If anyone wants to find it, all of the festival stuff is on catch up. You probably might have already found that out. It's all there. And if anyone's interested in this area, there is an hour's worth of content there that's well worth taking the time to listen to. It is a fascinating topic. I'm going to move on now, if that's okay. Thanks, Des, and thanks, Neil, for bringing that to our attention. It was a good discussion. I'm now going to ask Nick Hughes, if he's in the audience, to put his hand up, please. In that case, we're going to move on to the next question then. So, is there anyone in the audience? Oh, Nick's now got his hand up. Hello, Nick. Have you unmuted him, Ed? Hello, Nick.
Bear with me, I just can't see him on the list of attendees at this current second. Oh, there you go, got him.
Good, well done, Ed. Hello, Nick.
Hello, I think you should be through now.
Yeah, you're in. Yeah, you can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Right, it's a bit similar to the first question you asked, Nick, but I'll ask it. My question was, should we be using 85th percentiles at specific times of the day to address, to inform where mobile enforcement should be carried out? So, because basically we get people who say that the real dangers are the real fast speeders at the end of the days, that aren't reflected necessarily in the average or the 85th percentile speeds taken over a day.
Yeah. It is similar, you're right, yeah. But Med, did you want to add anything to come back on that?
Yeah, I think the behaviour changes when the enforcement pattern changes. So at the moment, if you had the chance to listen to my colleague Emma speaking about it earlier on this week, we're actually encouraging greater randomness and wider area enforcement so that actually we get to a more even picture where people are having to drive at the correct speeds the whole time and not anticipating that sometimes they'll be able to drive faster than others. We have absolute speed limits, so whilst there are real good issues around reducing casualties by targeting that work, we actually need to move, we think, in the other direction to ensure that people remain abiding with the law the whole time, because we can't predict what's going to happen next. I do think that once people identified that there was a margin on speed limits, overall speeds rose. And once people identified that during this pandemic outbreak that there was apparently less enforcement in certain areas, that had to be changed. Policies had to be changed because average speeds on those roads rose, and so did the lethality of the collisions that then took place. The maths involved is interesting. I don't argue that it should be targeted in accordance with fatalities. I don't argue with that, but we're actually looking to keep us all honest all of the time.
Thanks, Med. Thanks for that. I think unless anyone's got anything on the committee they want to add to that, we did do this topic earlier on. So thanks, Nick, for that, and I hope you found Med's answer useful. So there's two other participants with their hands up, Ed, I think. There's someone ready. Yeah.
Ian Price, who I've just allowed to talk.
Yeah. Hello, Ian. How are you? Hello, Ian. Is Ian Price there?
He's off mute, so he should be able to speak.
Hello, Ian. Give it one more go. Is Ian Price there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, thank you. Welcome. Could you say?
Sorry, guys. Yeah, down in West Wales, our connection isn't great, so there we are. On that last subject then, yeah, with regards to the 85th percentile, particularly over the COVID restrictions, we saw a big increase in complaints coming through as has been nationally. What we found we've been doing now, obviously with local authorities being restricted to putting out their speed surveys as well, and delays in that sense, we've been sending our teams out, our officers, to do covert assessments based on the intelligence from that complainant as to when the problem's at its worst. We'll just do a snapshot of speeds over an hour period, and if we think there's a problem there in that relevant time frame, we will target it as an operational site, bring it on that basis. We will target it for a period of time, see whether we've had an impact on it, raise it with local authority to look at it more holistically with regards to a longer survey. So yeah, we've been doing that for some time now down here. I tend to ignore 85th percentiles when it comes to our rural roads, particularly in Dyfed and Powys. Rural collisions tends to be the bigger problem for us. And the national speed limit roads, you're very rarely going to achieve 85th percentile above the threshold. So we tend to look at it more, where is the problem on our rural roads? Where are we having the predominant collisions, particularly in those high-speed roads? And we target them not on the 85th percentile, but based on the problem we've got.
An interesting point. Thanks very much, Ian, for making that. Is there anyone coming back on that from the panel, or are you happy that we've covered that off in the previous discussions? I think we probably have. Thanks, Ian, for making that contribution. That was very, very interesting. Ed, is there anything in the chat line that you've just caught your eye that you think we should put to the panel?
There's a question from Dave Holliday about pop-up cycle routes. He's talking specifically about bus stops and how these can have an impact on those. So I guess perhaps we could talk about
Dave's very hot.
I'll allow him to elaborate on his point.
Yeah, he'd make it much better than you would.
I'm sure he will.
Sure I could, yeah. I've actually got an incident which happened earlier this year in Kingston. What goes back to about 1987, when there was an experimental cycle route in Bedford which had a bus stop on it. And originally the cycle route was at the curbside between the bus shelter and the bus stop where the bus pulled in, and they got conflicts. So they had to reroute the cycle route round the back of the bus shelter. And we're seeing a number of places where a pop-up cycle route has been thrown in at the curbside and then taken straight through between the bus shelter and bus stop flag and where the bus pulls into the curb. So naturally we've got cyclists going at probably up to 15 miles an hour along the side of a bus, and someone steps straight off the bus and gets broadsided. That was actually witnessed in Kingston earlier this year. And I've seen pictures of very similar incidents. Living Streets in Edinburgh got ACOM to do a study with Napier on the bus stops on Leith Walk to look at conflicts, and I think Sustrans have also done some stuff on this. So it's getting the design of this right. And it seems to boil down to the fact that we're finding some absolutely appalling risk audits. You know, if you see the cycle route going straight past where people are going to get off the bus or walk out from the bus shelter as the bus approaches, someone surely should have seen that in the risk audit and saying, you know, the cycle route's got to go around the back of the bus stop. And it's not being picked up. So I'm just wondering whether the people who are doing the risk audits, and this is the wider thing, people who are doing road safety risk audits, do they need to have some kind of professional qualification, as you would have to have a CPC to be a transport manager on a road haulier's licence?
Right. Thanks, Dave. It's a good point. So, Philippa, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, I'll come in because I manage the audit teams, and I've also managed the teams that have been responsible for the reallocation of road space schemes. And I think Dave raises a really, really valid point, actually. And there was an awful lot of pressure from the Emergency Active Travel Fund that came out, the first tranche from the government, in terms of get these schemes delivered. And schemes were delivered very quickly with a very scant overview in terms of that road safety audit process. So I think it's a valid point. In terms of training for road safety audits, road safety auditors are trained. There's a national standard that they all should comply with, and it should include taking consideration for all road users, cyclists especially. So I think the query would be, if there are particular locations within your own authority that you're concerned about, I think the first point is to check whether road safety audit's been carried out at all on that location, and really following that through. The second tranche of money that's come through from the government, I think, reflects some of the concerns that have been pushed back in terms of the sort of speed that these schemes were delivered. And there's a more of a reflection and an audit and consultation process involved certainly in the second tranche of funding. But I think it's probably a valid point around the pop-up cycle lanes, but just to reassure that road safety auditors are very well trained actually within their fields, from my experience, and certainly within the teams that I'm responsible for.
Thank you. Anyone else on the panel want to comment on that one? Yeah, Colin?
And obviously the whole question of the pop-up cycle lanes in the aftermath of lockdowns and such like has been quite a lively debate, shall we say. The concerns that I have with it is, as I say, I think has already been mentioned, is the speed with which these things have been done. I don't think in very many cases there's been an awful lot of thought put in. It's just a case of, well, there's a large amount of money, we need to spend it quick, so let's just spend it on something. You know, it's a case of, yeah, we've got to do something, and that's something, so we'll do it. I don't think that's the right approach to take on any of this stuff. We need to give it some proper consideration and thought. Generally speaking, I do find that we do struggle an awful lot with the design of cycling infrastructure. Yeah, we quite often see that cyclists don't like what's being designed for them as well as everybody else. So the fact that we're capable of getting it so wrong surely points to the fact that we need to just take a breath here and stop and think very carefully about these schemes before they go in. Don't rush them. Think about them properly. Certainly, and again, when it comes to sort of like the safety audits, the training for people around it. I mean, I took a look at the guides that TfL have for putting in cycle infrastructure. And what struck me, and again, it was based on one reading, and I haven't gone into it in a great deal of depth, but all the criteria for evaluating them seem to be based on what's the experience for the user of the infrastructure, and there didn't seem to be one mention of what's the impact on other road users. And so certainly from a motorcycling perspective, we have got serious concerns that a lot of this infrastructure that is going in is probably making the roads less safe for motorcyclists, because we're not afforded the segregated space. We are left in the remaining much curtailed space that is left for motor vehicles, and thus put into closer proximity with all these vehicles that the cyclists are getting segregated from. So yeah, we've got serious concerns, and I think it is something that I'm not against putting in segregated cycle lanes, but I think we need to be very, very carefully considering how we do it. I don't think we're doing a particularly good job at the moment.
Strong comments there from Colin. So anyone want to come back before I move on, or are we happy to let him get away with that?
I think it's worth mentioning that the government have released the new sort of design standards now for cycling. You know, their sort of commitment towards cycling, a gear change, and that is significant. Actually, it makes significant steps across the standards that are expected now from cycling. It presents local authorities with challenge because it requires a significant amount, a lot more funding to be able to meet those standards, and that's the balance of provision of probably what we would class now as substandard provision against any provision at all or no provision at all. But I think you're right, Colin. I think I see it across my own authority where that we've done as good a job as we can do in terms of perhaps providing some infrastructure, but it's not as good as it should be. And the government's quite clear in what its expectations are now in terms of particularly cycling infrastructure. And just picking the point of safety audit, you know, safety audit's an odd term really. It should be a road user audit. That's exactly what it should be. It should be encompassing, and we're really keen that our audit team is made up of not just car drivers, for example. You know, there are strong cyclists within those. We've got motorcyclists, and we've got horse riders as well. So, you know, they should be seen as road user safety audits, not just pure a safety audit. And I think that's a really important point that Colin makes.
Right, now we've got time for one more question. The time's flown by, I've got to say. And there's one that's caught my eye on the column that I'm going to read out myself, actually, because I think it's quite an interesting statement and or a question from David Davies. And I'm going to read it out, David, if you're okay with that, because I can, because it's simple and short. And David says, or asks, is road safety education the triumph of hope over evidence? If not, what can it realistically deliver? And he says in brackets, I don't mean training. So he's talking specifically about road safety education. Michael, please. Hello, Michael.
Yep, I'm here. Struggling with the video, but I don't know if you can hear me audio-wise.
I hear you loud and clear.
That's fine. Well, it's what I've been involved in for 32 years, so I'm sure there'll be many people after I'm finished saying, well, he would say that anyway. I think, you know, if you look at the safe system, which most of us are trying to adopt now, there are various aspects of it. So you've got safer roads, roadsides, safer speeds, better post-crash attention, and of course you've then got safer vehicles, and finally, from our point of view, you get safer road users. And if you cannot try in some way and create safer road users to add that pillar in, then the system doesn't work as well as it should do. Education, I think, is important. I think it's about doing the right thing in terms of what you deliver and what you produce for people to use. And I think it's about making sure that it complements other things that are going on. In my early jaunts into road safety, when I first started back in 1982, we talked about the 3 E's. The safe system approach is a much more sophisticated one. But I still believe that road safety education is essential in that regard, because if you think it isn't, then you can actually say the same about any type of education. Why do we bother with it at all?
Yeah, thank you. Philippa?
Yeah, I think the key, you know, very much support what Michael's saying. I think the key for here, though, is making sure that the education provided has impact. It's not about providing it for providing its sake. It's around making sure that it's got those clear behavioural change things that we're all so aware of now. And it's that wider sort of toolkit of interventions and education, but it has to be at the heart of everything that we do. I'm a firm believer in really good quality evaluated education, and it can really deliver huge benefits for us. But it's not just for the sake of it, and I think that's a really key thing for us to get across. That's been quite difficult at the moment as we've moved things online, particularly making sure that we're still having that sort of same impact in what we're delivering, it in a new way of delivering, and that's key to that road safety education piece at the moment at this sort of challenging time.
Ian, Edwards, you got your hand raised up. Leave it raised up. I'm not going to come to you just now. I'm going to come to you in just a minute. So, Liz, you want to add anything on this one?
Yeah, I mean, really, just to add to what Michael and Philip have already said. I mean, and obviously my work is mostly focused around theatre and education work at the moment. Obviously, that's just one element of the education that lots of road safety officers deliver. But I think it's really important that we move towards a public health approach to educational interventions. As the others have said, you can't say that education is not important. I don't think we're quite hitting the mark yet with regards to what we're doing. When we look at what the evidence tells us, if we're still focusing on risks and consequences, we know that that doesn't have the effects on behaviour change. It might change attitudes marginally, but only for a very short period of time. So it's kind of, how do we use it right, and can we make sure that when we try things out, we test it, we evaluate it, we learn from it, and we grow from it and build on that success. So I think that's where we need to sort of going forwards.
Thanks. Med, do you want to add anything to this one?
No, I think Elizabeth and Philippa have said everything that needs to be said. I concur entirely with what they're saying.
Right. Ian Edwards, his hand's raised. Ian, do you want to come in on this? Can you unmute Ian, please? Ed?
Hiya, hopefully you can hear me.
We can hear you, yeah.
Yeah, bro. I just think it's a very nuanced issue, isn't it? It depends on what you're looking at road safety education to do, and also the fact that perhaps road safety education perhaps has never been well thought through from its design perspective, which is what Liz touched on. But also it creates an environment where people will obey the law. They will understand the law. You know, they will have more regard for that law because they will recognise it. It allows us to introduce new laws when we win the argument about something. People will go, yeah, that makes common sense because I understand it. If we look at the introduction of speed cameras, safety cameras, one of the things I think we got wrong was we didn't do enough education to the public about why we were putting them in the first place. Then we had a big backlash, and we've struggled a number of years to win that, and we've now won that argument. You know, I know there's a few vocal groups who would say we haven't, but generally most people like speed safety cameras now. So it's much more nuanced than whether or not if you turn up to an event and that event suddenly changes people's views. It's probably much more nuanced than that. And if we don't invest enough in education, we do that at our peril, I think. So that's all I was going to say, really.
Thanks, Ian. Anyone else in the audience want to raise their hand and make a point? There's been quite a lot of reaction on the chat line. Anyone else want to come in at this point? Fiona Filan, you're there. You want to say anything? Yeah, there's a couple of hands raised now, Ed.
Yeah.
Who have you unmuted?
We've got Dave Holliday is back.
Yeah, I just came across a report. A pensioner was run over by a truck. So I think it was in the West Country. The Devon coroner was doing the coroner's inquest. And I have a bête noire about drivers of large vehicles reversing with no attendant on foot. I usually stop about 2 or 3 vehicles a year, prevent the driver from reversing until they can get an attendant. Occasionally it involves much swearing as well.
Be quick if we can, please. We've only got a few minutes left.
Well, basically, I think there's probably about 10 to 20 people avoidable deaths per year of vehicles manoeuvring in tight spaces without somebody in charge of the manoeuvre on foot. And whether coroners should be issuing Section 28 reports, and we should be looking for hauliers and retailers to actually make sure there is an attendant to guide these people in with increasing numbers of pedestrians on the street.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Dave. Is there anyone else who wants to come in on the point about education? Is the hand raised, Ed?
It's just in Ed's hand still raised. There's no new hands. Sorry.
That's fine. Okay, that's fine. David Davies, do you want to say anything about the responses to your question, your rather provocative question, David? No? Okay. Well, look, if not, then I'm going to close the session. Tell you what, that's absolutely whizzed by for me. I can't believe how quickly it's gone, 1 hour and 4 minutes. It's been fantastic. And what's been great is the interaction from the audience. So thank you all very much indeed for participating so well. I know it's difficult when you're in a virtual situation rather than actually live, but I think the audience have made this hour go really quickly by putting some really good points across and participating absolutely better than I thought they would, actually. So thank you all very much in the audience. We've peaked at about 55, 56, I think, attendees. So that's not bad at all. Can I, on your behalf from the audience, thank the panelists. You've provided a really eloquent set of questions and some very thought-provoking answers. And I've really enjoyed the whole thing. So I hope everyone else has as well. And that actually closes the Festival of Road Safety for this year. So I think most people seem to think it's been a success, which has been great. And I'd like to thank everyone again for attending today. Wish you all the best and remind you that you can catch all of the content from the festival on Catch Up. So it'll be on the festival website. We'll be pinging out 1 or 2 reminders over the next week or so, so people get there and get the valuable information that's been imparted. And thank you all very much indeed. And that closes question time at the Festival of Road Safety. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.